Illumineers, and welcome back to the Madhouse. And today we're talking Amber Steel variations, Amber Steel deck lists. I've got 13 actually to show you all. And the reason I'm going Amber Steel is because all 12 of these 13 lists have 12 of the same exact cards in them, because it just goes to show just how powerful it is to control the early game. So we're going to look at some traditional SteelSong. We're going to look at some of this Mufasa SteelSong or Amber Steel, some Doc stuff, and some kind of spicy lists. So hold on to your belts. We're going to be doing some singing together, and we're going to look at some pretty awesome things going on. But first up, we're looking at traditional. When I talk traditional lists, I'm talking just the old fashioned. I'm going to play 1, 2, 3 that's all sing that help me control the board. And I'm going to spin the game controlling the board. And eventually, I'm just going to have this really wide board and just quest in these huge increments with these two questers, with Lilo and Daisy and Smee and Lawrence, Robin Hood, Rapunzel, all these cards that are questing for 2. I mean, you look at Amber Steel in this traditional list, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters that are questing for 2 or more. And that leaves only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 characters that only quest for 1. So all of your cards in this traditional list are just threats. And this is my traditional list that I'm currently practicing with and enjoying. I still believe that traditional is the strongest of the SteelSong lists. I'll just say it right now. I just think that it holds its own into so much of the meta, and it doesn't. I still feel like it's not as, it doesn't carry the game as much as it used to, but you still, there's matches where you just decimate the field, and that's just the end of it. And of course, we do have some help now into the Ruby Sapphire, which is the more difficult one. If you wanted to help some more, you could always add in the Baloos. But here we've got the Lilos, the 1/2/2, the zombie Lilo that's coming back from your discard. Remember, don't draw until you decide if you want her to come back. We've got the 2 daisies that I've opted for here because I really like seeing a 1-drop in this meta, especially where we're seeing so much green purple and so much purple. If they play that Turnabox Followers or that Diablo, then we can use Daisy to take those out so they're not questing. We can use Daisy to take out a Cursed Merfolk. So just any 1-drop I'm feeling pretty happy with. In worst case scenario, Daisy Duck is a 1/4 that turns into a really good heal with Rapunzel. And something to keep in mind there, another thing that Daisy Duck does really well is we're seeing a big jump in blue steel temp or blue steel aggro tempo, whatever you want to call it, blue steel Alice, and they all run Plutos. So Daisy, can hit into the Pluto so something else can take it out. Experimenting with When Will My Life Begin right now. This card, it's a 3 cost, and your opposing character can't challenge next turn, and you get to draw a card. This is in place of World's Greatest Criminal Mind right now. And the idea here is that we're not seeing a whole lot of cards with 5 or more attack. It's a very aggro heavy field right now, where we saw DeCandio win. We will talk about his list, but so what we're trying to do is edge out all these aggro cards, and especially the Calhouns. So now your Cindy can come down. Maybe you only have Let the Storm Rage on in this. When Will My Life Begin? So you can When Will My Life Begin to draw. And ultimately, when SteelSong loses, it's only typically because they don't have draw power. So now with Whole New World, with the Rapunzel, with When Will My Life Begin, and Aerials, like, we have lots of draw power here. Things that I might consider differently with this list, possibly dropping a Zeus and adding in something else, maybe another Daisy, maybe a Baloo, maybe a Naveen. But I'm liking the list so far. It's feeling good. Definitely still need some more testing to kind of see how often I brick with so many Zeuses, but right now this is only 14 uninkables. It's going really well. I'm really enjoying the list, but let's move on to another traditional list, and this is still that same kind of traditional list, but I call this the 4x4 Sonic Rig. and this is the Oyola special. This is close to what Markoth ran at CCS Collectibles when he went undefeated in Swiss. And we're just seeing it's that same idea of that previous version that I showed. It's doing really good across the whole field, but this Oyola special is really just decimating the field for the most part, and other than the red blue matchup. So in this list in particular that I'm showing here, I'm trying to edge a little bit more into that without losing a lot of the stuff that we love. And that's so I added in the two Lilos, the Daisy, the Blue. Of course, the Blue could be a third Daisy, or you drop Lilo for a second Blue, because if typically when you lose to red blue, it's only you get to 17 or 18, and then you get that loss. Mark Koth at CCS Collectibles lost one of his games at 18. So there is that argument that maybe you just drop the Lilos and go with Blue, where red blue is dropping their B preps so low. And maybe that is all of the answer that you need to say, all right, Lilo's not as powerful as she was at the start when red blue was running all those B preps. So you just add in the blues, you get into them, you can cycle into them. When my life began, whole new world, Rapunzel, that draw package there. But yeah, we're seeing this do really well. Markoth is still running it, and it's just another deck that does really well into so much of the field. And you get to draw, like if you have Sonic Warrior down, you get to draw a card and deal 3 damage to something. It just feels pretty good. So definitely give it a try if you wanted to do something new, if you got those foil aerials sitting in the back corner. But next up, this is a list that I showed in my video the other day. Ethan P. He took this to Red Saber Games and split in top 4. And I wanted to show this list again because it's doing something really unique where we see the Gastons and the shift line. And typically, we see Wochuk that made the Gaston version super popular back in set 4. And you typically see the Gaston when you don't see a shift line. But Ethan came out, ran the Gastons and the shift. And the nice thing about the Gaston is I think he's just a really strong card when you know what you're playing against. So whether you win or lose first game, second game, you get to make an even more informed decision. Maybe you're playing non-green, so you're like, you know what? I'm going to keep Gaston and wheel because there's no way they can get rid of my wheel, and I have the hand to support it. So you go, maybe you go Daisy into a Smee, into a Gaston, into a wheel, and you just get to go crazy, or even a Daisy into an Ursula, into a Gaston, whatever it may be. And of course, he has the one Naveen in here, and then you always have the Robin Hood if you just needed to go that route against something like Purple Steel, where you just needed to control the board with Robin Hood, get those big Rapunzel heals, and you're not as concerned about Whole New World. The other thing is Gaston, much like Ursula, is just a really safe card that's going to be able to sing your songs. And Gaston, the advantage over Ursula, of course, is that he will trade into Fox or pretty much anything. And he also is not brawlable. And as long as they don't ice block you. So I just thought, I think this is a really unique list. I haven't played it yet, but it's definitely something that I'm going to experiment with. Possibly dropping a Zeus for a Lawrence. Maybe, yeah, definitely a couple things I might change. The Lawrence being the big one. Time and time again, we try to drop Lawrence in our SteelSong list ever since set 4. And by the end of the set, we're always adding in the Lawrences again. So we need to learn from our mistakes here. I'm also more of a fan of Spin over Pluto, so I might try that. But I think try this list first and then make adjustments as you see fit. Next up, though, we got Brian J., another list that I showed from the other day. I just wanted to highlight a Queen package. And, this Queen package in here going heavy with the Daisies, heavy with the Queens to really beat up red purple, to really beat up red blue. We see the Prince Naveens helping you sing all these songs. This is the same amount as normal. We're just going the one World's Greatest Criminal and the one Bare Necessities. And this is something we'll talk about a little bit later, but there might be a world where when you run this many Naveens, maybe you run Grab Your Swords, and we'll show a list off later. and we'll kind of talk about something that happened to me at my locals the other night. But again, just highlighting that Queen is still here. Queen is still kicking butt, still doing really well. Brian, I believe this was at the CCS event and did really well with it. Top 8, top 16, one or the other. So either way, he won money going to the event with the Queen package that a lot of people have said has been dead. So another really stellar list, another way you could build the deck. I may have mentioned this the other day. One thing to keep in mind with Queen is of the shift line, she's if you're looking at Robin Hood versus Queen, Queen is much more difficult. All right. She has a much higher skill gap because a lot of the times people see a shift line and they think, okay, I have the one drop, I have to play the two drop. Like because or I have to play the shift line because I have to shift it this turn because that's what you do. And a lot of people get stuck in that trap, and that's not necessarily the play because one of the nice things about having Queen on the field is your opponent has to respect this baby one cost 2/2/1, knowing that at any moment you might shift a 4/3/2 that turns your Daisy Duck into a 5/4 and their Maui into into a baby that then dies to Daisy while your Daisy lives. And so they always have to respect this Queen as long as it's on the field. So the better play might be to just play Queen, play Smee, or play Queen and play a Daisy, play the Ursula. If you go Queen into Ursula into a Lawrence, like you have big questers, you have ways to control the board, and you can shift Queen whenever you want. So just keep in mind that when you play Queen, there's a lot of different lines that you're allowed to use her with. So don't put yourself in that hole where you're like, all right, here's a Queen. Well, my turn 2, I have to shift Queen. And now you've just lost all this momentum to play essentially one character. So just understand that going into the Queen package that slow down a little. All right. You don't have to shift. I promise it will be okay. But next up, we have our last traditional list. Yeah, our last traditional list. And this is the grab your swords that I was talking about. And, this is Wocha Lindrake. This was at the site, we'll call it the Sunday event. So this wasn't the EU Continentals, but it was the event the next day. It had a lot of people, a lot of really, really good players. And he ended up placing top 16, I think, with this list. Top 4 with this list. So did really, really well with it. And I really wanted to highlight this list because it is running Grab Your Swords, which a lot of us, myself included, has written off because I absolutely hate Grab Your Swords. I hate the card so much ever since Bucky was eroded. And I just hate that it's bad into red blue. I hate that it's another 5 cost uninkable when we're running 4 whole new worlds, the 3 Zeuses in this case, and you're just stuck with it. It's when it's so bad into so much. But there's more because now we're seeing this really fast meta. We're seeing this meta that's really fast, a lot of low to the ground characters, green, purple, where it probably really shined into so much green, purple in EU. We're probably going to see more green, purple here. We're seeing a lot of this aggro dock song. So maybe you run a double grab your swords. And of course, the Naveen can come down to sing that grab your swords and you clean up with all these other songs. You've got the piglets to go fast against red blue. Lawrence's, of course, that are doing big work against red blue. And I mentioned the other day something happened, and I was playing. I was having a good time. I was at like 15 lore, and I had probably 15 to 20 lore showing on the board. Like my board was massive, and I was playing a SteelSong mirror. I'd controlled the whole game, and I ended up losing the game because I didn't expect them to be running 4 grab your swords. They were running 3 Prince Naveens and 4 grab your swords. And it was game 1. And what had happened is I wheeled and they ended up playing Prince Naveen and a grab your swords. And I was like, all right, that's not a big deal. And next thing you know, the next turn they just played a grab your swords by itself, and then they just wiped my whole board. And I was like, okay, that sucks. Well, let me refill now. And then next thing you know, they Naveened grab your swords again, and then they cleared my board again the next turn. And the point is that with all this aggro song, maybe there's a world where grab your swords can come back. I Would I run four? No. Two would probably be the max that I would go, just because again, it's a 5 cost on inkable song. When it's good, it's good. When it's bad, it's really, really, really bad. But I think there is a world right now in this particular meta where there's a possibility, especially where red blue has gotten, it's just felt really, really slow. So maybe you're not as worried about getting stuck on a grab your swords because they're going slower. Just food for thought. If you wanted to play grab your swords, if you've always been a really big fan of it, I believe Stuart Vasquez, I think is his name, in the 20 Lord Discord. He's really high on Naveen and grab your swords because of what it does right now in the current meta. So something to consider in the traditional list. Moving on though, we've got Doc song. All right, this is that Doc aggro song. It's essentially aggro Amber Steel with a heavy emphasis on your draw being Rapunzel and Doc. And first off, we might as well start off with the list that is on everyone's mind, and that's DeCandio's Diggy Diggy Hole list, his Dwarf Mine list. And I kind of alluded to my thoughts on this list in my previous video talking about the CCS 10K, and I might have some haters for this, and I put a lot of thought into it of why I look at this list and something just feels wrong. Something feels weird, and I haven't been able to put my finger on it until the other night. I was driving to my locals and trying to figure out why did the list just feel so strange to me? Because we run these 3 happies, these 4 docs, these 4 mines, and I'm looking at the happies, I'm looking at the mines, and it just feels so slow and awkward. And it dawned on me that, and maybe I'm completely off, but it dawned on me that I think it might have something to do with the Nala effect. And what I mean by the Nala effect is when Wochuk first started putting Nala in his SteelSong list, he talked about how Nala was only in there because it was the best of the bad 1 drops. And where I do disagree with Wochuk on that stance, I think there's better 1 drops. That's another conversation. I think this happy in mine is that Nala effect of I think DeCandio looked at his list and said, I have a really good aggro list here. I have these stellar cards. Can go really, really fast, and I'm running docs already. What do I finish my list with? Because when you look at these aggro lists, and I'm going to show another aggro list that I've been running, a lot of the cards are the same. The core is the same, but we just don't have a whole lot more to questers. We don't have a whole so I think DeCandio looked at his list and said, what can I add that's not going to be a major detriment? And when he first built this list, green steel was really popular in NA, so it made sense to build the happy, and it made sense to do the mine, because now on turn 3, if you played, mine on turn 2, if that was like your best play, or on turn 4 even, you have a Let the Storm Rage on in your hand, where you drop the mine, you drop the happy, or I guess that'd be turn 5, right? Because you drop the mine, you drop the happy, and then you move the happy to the mine to deal 2 damage. But when you look at a lot of the games that DeCandio was in that were streamed, he inked a lot of the mines. And I think that's ultimately what it comes down to is if you have to choose between playing characters and everything, you're going to play characters over the mine. And we did see where that pinging 2 damage did pay dividends at times, especially I think there was a green purple player where he was able to bounce them from mine to mine to deal a bunch of damage. And that's how I look at it. And I think it just makes sense because you'll see when you look at my aggro list, we have a lot of the same cards. I just don't run these 7 here and replace them with something else. And just a really effective list. That mine has 6 health. So instead of the Nala that has 4, you have the mine that has 6. He has the Kitas. This is something he threw in the night before the CCS 10K. You'll see me talk about Kita later. I'm a huge fan of Kita. I really like Kita. I only recently learned that she doesn't work on rush characters, which I'm really glad I learned that now. But if you guys didn't know that, she only works on rush characters. The wording in the card makes no sense to me as far as why that is, but that's the way it is. I would like to experiment with again Sven's over Pluto. I'm just a huge fan of Sven. The way that Sven can come down, you know, like let's say you have a Lawrence down, you can quest with two. You play Sven to ready the Lawrence, and then Lawrence can sing Strength of a Raging Fire or Let the Storm Rage on. And so he gets to quest and sing in the same turn, and you get a two quester down. So I'm just a really big fan of Sven. I like what he does. I think he closes out games really well. But a really good list. I'd be curious, you know, if Tacandio did ever see this video or someone mentioned it to him, and I'd be curious if that was something or if I'm just way off and Tacandio thinks that, you know, mine and happy is just the best thing since sliced bread. And that's fine. So moving on though, we do have my list, and like you said, a lot of similarities. You know, now when we look at this list though, we have, I think personally, I think the best of the bad one drops, so to speak, is the Simba. I think Simba is just so effective because I really like to mulligan super heavy. And I just, especially game two, when I know exactly what I'm playing, I really like to just focus in, get this really heavy mulligan to get the cards that I really want into the matchup. And Simba lets me do that. Simba, if I see Simba in my opening hand, there's times where I just mulligan six because I know for a fact that I will be able to dig myself out thanks to Simba. And it also lets me keep cards on the, like, let's say I'm on the play or on the draw game one, it lets me keep cards that I might not. For example, the big one here is Tiana. Tiana is that card that is really bad into red, but I found it to be really good into a lot of other matchups. And if I don't know what I'm playing against, I might keep Tiana in my opening hand if I have a Simba, because maybe turn one I can play a Daisy or another one drop. A lot of time I'm searching for that Cindy. And then turn two, turn three, like when I found out what they are, if they are red, then I have the option to dump that Tiana for an inkable anytime because I have Simba. And it might not be an inkable, but you get the point. So I'm a huge fan of Simba. You lose the Rapunzel opportunity with Simba over Nala, but I just like the cantrip effect of being able to dig through my deck to find the cards that I really need, like the Doc, and then maybe Tiana's, the Svens, Rapunzels, whatever it is. The rest of the list, though, of course, that's the spice in this list, is the Simbas and the Tianas. But you see my Svens here. Huge fan of Sven. If I was to cut Tiana's, which a lot of people have, you know, shout out to JDRR. He despises that I run Tiana in this list. But he I just, so far she's done really well for me. And when I look at this though, if I was to cut the Tianas, it'd probably be to up the Calhoun and probably just up the Kita, and then pretty much have a, yeah, I'd have a four of everything. And that's what I would do if I was to cut those. Or cut the two Tianas and go two Baloos. Could be another option as well. But yeah, it's a list that I've had a lot of success with. I'm 9, 12 and 0 at locals, I believe, with this list. My traditional, I'm also done really well with as well. And so I don't know which list I'm gravitating towards, but it's gone really well. I encourage you, if you've never tried Aggro Song, definitely try these. But when we look at this, the Kitas, I'll mention that really quick. Again, big fan of Kita. The reason Kita's in here and is because Kita comes out when you're top decking and doing this stuff. She's an inkable, but she's a great top deck because a lot of times you have these characters down, you've run out of songs, you've run out of spins, you've run out of all this stuff, and you just need your characters to live. So you're on this turn. If your characters can live one more turn, you're going to win. You top deck the Kita. Now they can't do anything. The only hope that they have is that they have a bunch of songs or actions to clear your board. And that's why Kita's there. She's just a really good top in, top deck, big body, quest for 2, Rapunzel target. That's all it is. So, moving on, we have the last one. This is the only list that I have that is not running the Cinderella, Let the Storm Rage On, and Strength of a Raging Fire. And I wanted to show off this list. We got Lego Me. He posted this list today in the aggro song page on 20 lore, and I wanted to show this off because of Winnie the Pooh. Exclusively because of Winnie the Pooh. I didn't think I'd see Winnie the Pooh in any list this set, and he's had a lot of success with this. He went 3-0 at his locals the other night. And when I look at it, this is essentially just a really hyper aggro Amber Steel list. And when you look at it, you got 4, 8, 12, 16 1-drops. You know, you got your Lilos and your Daisies, your Captain Hooks are challenging, maybe Calhoun's, whatever it may be. But the Piglet or the Simba, I think, is just so spicy because you can play Simba. The Winnie the Pooh is so spicy because you play the Winnie the Pooh, you have support, but even more importantly, now if you play this on 2, on turn 3, you could go double Piglet, you could go double Smee, and Piglet. So you could go just super wide all of a sudden because you played this Winnie the Pooh. I'm gonna sleeve it up just to give it a try. I think it's fun. I think it's cute. People would be so confused by seeing Winnie the Pooh. And of course you have the Donald Ducks that is coming down and help if you go Daisy into Piglet into Donald Duck, on turn 3, you're questing for 3, 4, 5, 6 after questing for 2 with Daisy, so you're already at 8. That's a lot to deal with when you have a bodyguard on field. And then Prince Eric, another just questing for 2 with bodyguard, and he's a 1-3 with resist +1. The Fire the Cannons to help you answer the Cindy's on turn 1, right? So if you're on the draw, they play a Cinderella, then you can just answer with a Fire the Cannons. And the Smash, right, to just deal with, well, whatever has 3 health. So just a really hyper aggro Amber Steel list, and I thought it was really cool. I thought it was really neat, so I wanted to throw it in here. Again, it's the only list that's not running that song package, and a lot of the reason I called this an Amber Steel video. So thanks for sharing this list, man. Next up, though, we're going to highlight some Steel Fossa lists because Steel Fossa has really been making an impact. And I believe there's 3 lists that I'm going to show off. But this first one here is Traders of the Lost Ark, as he's known on the 20 lore page. And when we look at this list, I'm a huge fan of this list, most of it. I love seeing this Imperial Bow. He's been really successful into purple with this list because of Imperial Bow. It lets him, it's an item that is inkable, so if he's not playing purple, then he can lose it, he can get rid of it. But that Imperial Bow just giving you +2 and evasive is just so powerful when you have a Calhoun that you can use it on. And other heroes, I'd have to look. I know Rapunzel's a hero. Maybe Chip is. Maybe that's a part of the reason he runs Chip. I can't see it right here. But, you know, especially on the Calhoun, that's just so powerful right there. And this list, though, it's, you know, it's a Steel Fossa list, which is something you haven't seen for a while. You don't see a lot of Mufasa being successful. I think the Dale or the Chip is really interesting. You know, that one, it has that Donald Duck effect where when it comes down, it gives something a lore, which is really neat. So now it kind of the same thing as Donald Duck, but the difference here is that it doesn't have bodyguard, but it does trade. And that's one of the huge downfalls of Donald Duck is that Donald Duck doesn't trade. So you get this really big turn of questing. It protects your characters, but it can be brawled and it can be traded into, and they come out on top. So that really hurts. But Chip, you know, kind of changes that where you get to give something an extra lore. So you still quest for 6 on your turn 3, but you also have a 3/3 on board. The other thing about this list is we're running the docks, which 2/3/2 doesn't trade into things, but you're now on your turn 4. You can play Akita, you can play, a Mufasa, you can possibly shift a big Cinderella. So just lots of opportunities here as well. And just it's a cool list. I thought it was a lot of fun. I don't I'm sure if I was to ask him, you could cut the Mufasas. Typically, in a lot of Mufasa lists, it's really funny because they're Mufasa lists, but the weakest card in the deck is typically Mufasa because it's just a slow card that doesn't do anything. But it's questing for two. It trades with pretty much most things early, and you get a body out of it. So if you do quest with it and maybe you get blessed with a Cindy or maybe you get blessed with a Kita, the Pluto, whatever it may be. And I mean, when you look at this, even if you get blessed with a Calhoun or a Smee, a Chip, like they're not bad cards to hit as well. So a good Steel Fossil list that he's had a lot of success with. He said he's 9-1 right now with this list. So next up, we got Ruben S. And this one, he got third at the CCS 10K. And I've got to admit, when I see this list, I don't see it. Okay. And this is again being hypercritical here. There's just so much going on with this list. I hate seeing Mufasa and then saying 4, 8, math is hard, 11 songs. Like that just really eats me up inside. I think that's just the odds of Mufasa showing you a song or just a really bad character is just it's kind of high. I don't really want to see my Mufasa show a Gantu because that just feels really bad. It's just a 4-3. If he lives, awesome, but like that just feels bad. Now if Mufasa shows a Cindy, a Chinpo, Pluto, even Rapunzel, that's not so bad. But there's just, with you got 11 songs that it can show and you get nothing. You've got a Cindy, which would feel bad, a Doc feels bad, an Ursula feels bad. This Doc probably feels bad. They trade into it and they win out of it. So there's just a lot of bad Mufasa hits with this deck. Ruben did say though that in his opinion Mufasa is the worst card in the list. It's just one of those things that he inked it most of the day, but it's in there for red insurance. And essentially you're just threatening red because red wants to control the board. They want to remove your characters so that they can then eventually get their field going. So Mufasa just makes it a little bit more annoying for them to do so. It makes them not want to remove it. Meanwhile, you're questing for 2, so they have to. So that's why it's in there. It's red insurance that's also inkable. So I didn't mention this the previous one. I'm honestly a huge fan. If you're gonna run a list like this where you're running Ursulas and so many songs, I'd rather just see a 0 to hero. I'd rather see 3 or 4 0 to heroes. It's more on inkables, but you're only on 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 on inkables. So maybe you can add in 3 more. You go to 18. And I don't think that's too bad. For a lot of people, that's really high. Maybe it is. But with 0 to hero, you're able to do these massive cheat turns. And essentially, that's what you're trying to do with Mufasa anyways. You're just trying to play Russian roulette and hope that you get a good card on it. Remember, though, with Mufasa, you don't get to throw the card. Like, just make sure you read Mufasa. It's not an instant, oh, it's a character, I have to play it kind of thing. Like, just read Mufasa so you know exactly how he works, okay? That's all I'm going to say on that one. But we got one more Mufasa list. And this one is really cool to show off. This is Disney Dad, Tofu Warrior. I'm assuming he goes by somewhere, but it's a little blurry. Apologies. But when we look at this list, it just has a whole bunch of stuff in it. We have this really aggro package here with the daisies, the Lilos, the piglets, and then we have the Cindy package here with the 4 strength and the 4 let the storm rage on. We have the Calhoun's. I think she's a pseudo song is how I refer to her, as you play her on 2 And then essentially your opponent has to respect that you have this card on the field, and that is going to get you to lore and take something out as soon as they turn something sideways. When we look at the rest of it, we got Blues, we've got Perditas, which is awesome. And this, when I look at this list, I see a deck that is really trying to edge out red in a big way. You got Mufasas, right, that are red protection. You've got Blues that are red protection, and Perditas that are red protection. When you play a Perdita, then this goes back to the I'll say the Oyola special again, because Mr. Perdita Song himself, got his top he got third place at Dallas Fort Worth with Perdita, and he ran Perdita because it's a 1/6 body that gets you another card. So in this list, it's getting you a lot of different cards. And so you run Perdita and you get a guaranteed character, and now they essentially have to play a B prep. Like that's really all that's left for them. Like they have to have some kind of really good hard removal, because it's going to be really hard to remove both characters when they're not exerted. And that's just really great. And that Simba's, there's a lot of stuff for them to turn over. You've got this whole top end that you're actually like not upset with seeing. And that's what I really like of when you're running Mufasa. I want to see just a massive amount of cards that you're not upset with seeing get turned over. So in this list, we've got Perdita that's doing something the moment she comes down. We've got a nice big Robin Hood that if they take it out with a character, you draw a card. Sven that is readying something if it's there. Rapunzel that can heal. Pete that's letting them not play any actions. Lawrence, Baloo, just a lot of different things here that I think makes this version of a Mufasa deck extremely potent, extremely powerful, and I really like it. He's done extremely well with it so far on the training site, the Lorcana training site that we won't talk about. All right, it's like Fight Club. But moving on, really impactful list. Really like it. Really think it's just something special when you're trying to run Mufasa. So let's talk about our last couple lists. I called this one the Spice because a lot of these lists are going to reference players lists that have done really, really well with SteelSong in the past. So first up on the list is Alex Hansen, and we got this name up here. So this is Alex Hansen's list that he ran at the CCS 10K. And when you look at this list, the name is just so perfect for this list because of I messaged him. I asked like, oh, fun fact, Alex is going to come on the channel. We're going to do a nice little interview, talk about SteelSong, Continentals, all of that. So stay tuned for that. But anyways, back to this list. He sent it to me, and I was like, dude, I look at this list, and the first thing that comes to mind is you showed up to CCS, and you're like, I'm just going to throw in everything and see what I like, because what I really care about is Continentals. And he's like, yeah, that's pretty much what it was. Like, he's like, I wanted a whole bunch of cards in here that I wanted to see how I'd feel about them, if I was to run SteelSong at Continentals. So when we look at this list, that's what he did. Look at this. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. 1, 1, 2, 2, like 1, 2. It's a list that's all over the place, but there's some really impactful things to look at here. This I believe it's I Won't Give In. But I Won't Give In. It's letting you sing this song, you get to bring back a character that costs 2 or less back to your hand. So if you guys remember at Seattle where he got his Continental invite, he was running one of Hades. This I Won't Give In is essentially Hades, okay? Where instead of being a character that does it, now you get to use it as a song. So it's more for your Cindy to do. So you get to pull back. I think one of the better targets is going to be this Doc if you really need that draw power. But of course, there's other things in here. The cantrip Simba. Maybe you have big Simba in your hand, so you want to play the little Simba to get that shift line ready. Just a lot of opportunities with that card in this list. We've got the 3 Beasts. Alex did talk about how Beast was kind of one of the more worse cards in the deck. One of the yeah, but it's a card that didn't perform as well as he had hoped in this current meta. But a list again, I would not copy if you were to copy pasta any list from this video. I think you would be fine except for this list. I would not recommend copy pasta this list just because it was an experimentation of testing what do I like, what do I not like. And there's a lot of things going on with this list. So just something to keep in mind. That is not a shot at Alex by any means. That's just a understand that this is not a copy pasta list. That's all I'm gonna say there. But there are some interesting things. We're about to talk about the Simba line, but the John Silver, which I've been seeing pop up, it's essentially When Will My Life Begin, but a character. It's a 3/3/1 character that your opponent can't challenge the next turn, or opposing character can't challenge in the next turn. I think that's a really effective thing. I could see why people are starting to include that as we see more Calhoun. So, and also when we see green purple and purple steel running a lot of crab, all of a sudden their one drop, their Diablo, you're not worried about next turn being crabbed. So it makes their turn 3 potentially a little weird. So just different things to think about. I really wanted to showcase this because it just kind of goes to show nothing is out of Amber Steel right now. Like if you're going to an event, you're not playing Amber Steel, and then you see them ink a steel card and then play an amber card, it's no longer a guarantee of traditional SteelSong. It may be a Mufasa list, it may be aggro. You just don't know. And that's the beautiful thing about Amber Steel right now, that honestly no other list can say they have. In my opinion, I don't think any other color scheme can say that it's this diverse. And again, that's what makes us the best. But next up, we have this is a list that I showed off in a video a while back. And over here, this is Boomy Seattle underneath it. But I'm going to say Heisenbell, maybe is how it's pronounced. But they've been running this list in off the aggro song. They've had a lot of big success with this list, playing it. And I don't know if they've made any changes on it. They haven't said, but this list, when I first kind of put this together, it was motivated by Boomy and the idea of still running wheel in a very aggro list. So how do we go about doing that? If we looked at Boomy in Seattle, his list of course ran the Robin Hood shift package as well. And I don't believe it ran Gaston's. It may have been Naveen's, but when I looked at it, I was like, I really like what Kita's doing. I really like the shift line there. I really like Sven. So I kind of put this together. Heisenbell's had more reps into it than I have, but they say that it's gone really well. So who am I to say it's not a great list? I do still think that you might be able to go the Boomy route where you kind of run a little bit of both like he did in Seattle. But I think the list is in a good place. I think that it does what it does really well. I threw the Gastons in here because of the same reason I mentioned it earlier with the build that was running the Robin Hoods and Gastons. And that is that if you have a really good 1/2 drop, then you can keep that Gaston in Whole New World and be guaranteed a Whole New World on turn 4. Because unlike Wochuk's list where you have Ariel, you don't have that dig in this list. So you're relying on Rapunzel and then maybe the Whole New World if you get it off. Just another spicy list, something to try, something that Heisenbell has had a lot of success with. So last up on our list, we have, in my opinion, one of the best SteelSong players out there. This is Frank Karsten with his list. We saw something very similar to this in the LCCC, the LCCC. Hopefully you guys have been watching it, where he was running 4 Simbas, I believe. But in this list, he's running 3 and 2. And he ran this for the EU Continentals and the EU Sunday Revival event. And unfortunately, at Continentals, the bubble, or not the bubble, but draws best of 2 just really beat him up that day. But we look at this list and we're seeing something that reminds me of when we ran the double shift package with Queen and Robin Hood, in the sense that Robin Hood is really great into most matchups, not the best into red though. But then in red, you have this Simba line that is really good because Simba's a 4/4. Simba is doing that thing where it doesn't die or get banished by Brawl, Medusa, unless they have the ice block. And meanwhile, Simba's also readying your characters. I think this is something I talked about with Chris Oyola last night a lot, is that I think Simba, there's something there. I think there's something really impactful, really strong about Simba. We just haven't quite figured it out. And is it in SteelSong? I don't know. I really don't. I don't think so, but I think there's some kind of crazy line that someone's going to figure out, and that is just so impactful because this ability to ready all of your characters is just, it's so strong. It's so good. We just have to figure out what that line is, and it takes way better players than me, that are great at deck building to really figure that out, because that is not my power whatsoever. But just a really good list by Frank, by Mr. Karsten himself, and that I think is something that you could take and do really well with at locals or anywhere. And maybe for you, not, or if you wanted to change some things, maybe you can go up the Lawrence's again. I'm a big sucker for Lawrence. I love me some Lawrence. He's just such a strong card. He's such a good Rapunzel target. But there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, that is all the lists. That is 13 lists. That is lists that have done really well, that I really wanted to show off, that I thought I just wanted to show people that SteelSong or Amber Steel is in a place that it's never really been before. If we go back to set 4, there was really one version, and that was flutes. And then later in the set, we saw flutes and harps. And then ever since then, we've just been getting more and more ability to do these things. And Amber Steel is just taking off. And a large part of it is because of that Cinderella, Let the Storm Rage On, and Strength of a Raging Fire that's letting Amber Steel just be so powerful, especially right now. Because if you get that Cindy and Let the Storm Rage On, you that's I think Cindy's the strongest turn one play in the entire game. Like I really do, because what Cindy does is your opponent now has to think, maybe they don't even play a one drop because they don't want you to let the Storm Rage on and get that draw power. And meanwhile, you might not even have Let the Storm Rage on in your hand. You might not have Strength of a Raging Fire. So Cindy by herself is threatening so much, and your opponent never knows if you run Big Cindy. So now they have to worry about that. Cindy is just such a powerful turn one play, and it's making every Amber Steel list become a really competitive deck when the meta is just so fast, when there's so many low cost 1 and 2 drops in the local meta. So all that being said, really great place, really good time to play Amber Steel because there's so many different decks. So please, if you see any decks you liked, if you are playing some Amber Steel and I didn't talk about it, let me know in the comments, like, what spice are you running that you've really enjoyed. If you like one of these deck lists, please let me know. I'll try and get all the lists posted in the comments, or posted. Yeah, we'll throw them all in the comments, all the description or all the links for the lists. But ladies and gentlemen, as always, stay happy and healthy, happy questing, and I will see you around. Until next time.